In this series, we've covered scandals involving Formula One's top teams like Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, and Williams, with Grob's team being the last to make it onto this dishonorable list and the final chapter of this mini-series. But this story doesn't end here. Now it's time to discuss the fifth most successful Formula One team statistically among today's Grand Circus grid. Holds 8 drivers and 6 constructors titles in its history. Red Bull, formed after buying the Jaguar team, has a shorter Formula One history than others but is already very successful. But despite this, there have been quite a few scandals involving this team. And it's necessary in this video to address the topic, just as we've done with practically all of its predecessors. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the top 5 biggest scandals of the Red Bull Racing Formula One team. In 2024, Red Bull started strong but their dominance faded. Due to misconceptions about the car and other teams getting their strategies right, the Drivers' World Championship title was at one point threatened by McLaren. And that led to an intense battle between the British team and Red Bull, where both teams accused each other of anything. By that year, there were already rumors that the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile had found something in Red Bull that forced them to remove it, with many people speculating. It was said to be an asymmetric brake system. However, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile banned this device but never revealed if anyone was actually using this system. But later in the year, Red Bull was actually found to have a system that, if misused, could be completely illegal. Before the United States Grand Prix, right in the middle of the battle between Red Bull and McLaren, a lot of rumors started to surface that a team on the grid had a system that allowed them to change the ride height of the car and adjust it during the race, breaking parc fermé and completely violating the technical regulations. On social media, many fans started to speculate that this team was McLaren, because most people thought that the huge jump in performance was suspicious, especially considering that it happened all of a sudden. But before the practice sessions for the United States Grand Prix in Austin, the media started to report that the team with that suspicious system was none other than Red Bull Racing. Supposedly, McLaren was the one who tipped off the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile that their rivals had this device after so many complaints that Red Bull had made against them, that the Team A, Papaya, used illegal tricks in their cars, and it was eventually revealed they had a device that changed the car's height. The device in question was the T-tray or T-plate, and the Formula One paddock wondered if it was used to make adjustments during the race to change the car's height, thus breaking parc fermé, which could be quite serious and, if true, could lead to the team's disqualification that season. Red Bull defended against accusations, stating both teams and the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile were aware of this device. Once the car was assembled and ready for the track, this device became completely inaccessible and couldn't be operated otherwise. For the same reason, it couldn't be used during races or qualifying. It was mainly a tool for engineers during car assembly and setup. And that this was just a witch hunt by the other rival teams? Verstappen himself said it was just drama, noting there was no way to access this device during qualifying or a race. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile closely examined the Red Bull car, focusing on the T-tray, and was satisfied with Red Bull's explanation after the investigation. And since there was no way to prove that this device was used in 3 sessions, Red Bull did not suffer any kind of penalty for having this system installed in their car. Nevertheless, and to give the other teams more confidence that this system was not being used illegally, some seals were placed to monitor this device. That way, they could ensure it wouldn't change during the Grand Prix. With this, they aimed to satisfy the teams, reaching an agreement with Red Bull so that in Brazil, they would completely remove this system, thus putting an end to the controversy. However, some teams obviously were not satisfied with this situation. But the controversy, despite being quite intense at that moment, especially because of the context surrounding it in the middle of the fight between Red Bull and McLaren, ended up coming to nothing. It became one of the tensest moments of the 2024 season in a rather interesting scandal that involved the Red Bull team in the midst of their battle against the McLaren team. And look, I know this controversy hasn't been a big deal. We initially planned to mention the Weber-Vettel 2010 Turkish Grand Prix accident scandal here, but we've already told that story twice, and we felt we wouldn't add anything new if we told it to you again. So, in 5th place, the controversy that arose at the United States Grand Prix over Red Bull's ride height adjustment system, the T-tray. The December holidays are over. Many of you likely traveled, discovered new places, and connected to public Wi-Fi, right? And well, if this was your case, I hope that this year your goal is to improve your cybersecurity, because you never know when, thanks to the dangers of joining a public network. Someone might be after your personal information, your banking data, your browsing history, or maybe even the furries you used as examples in past commercials are after you seeking revenge. Either way, you shouldn't take your personal information lightly, and if your goal is to improve your cybersecurity, there's a tool that serves this and many other purposes, and that's the VPN from our friends at Surfshark. When browsing public networks or visiting risky sites to download questionable files, what you're doing is opening a window for malicious people to end up getting hold of your valuable personal data. Doing this can, for example, expose you to having your bank account information stolen. And with that, you could end up with $1,000 debt spent on Roblox when you don't even play Roblox. That's where Surfshark comes in, using its stellar feature. The virtual IP changer works globally, and anyone trying to access your personal information will follow a fake IP, protecting your personal data from unauthorized access. This lets you use public Wi-Fi, download files, and browse websites more securely, so no one finds out you're a fan of furries? In addition to being able to access region-blocked content on streaming platforms like Netflix, Disney, or Homebox Office, subscribe and turn on notifications to use this feature that protects you and helps you bypass any problem. But look, I invite you to try the full VPN. What if you go to surfshark.com/skyline and use my code SKYLINE? You'll get 4 extra months when you sign up for this service, so you can use it on an unlimited number of devices. You can try it for 30 days, and if you don't like it or you're not convinced, you have a full money-back guarantee. So I invite you to give the multiple benefits of having a VPN a try with our friends at Surfshark. 2021 was one of Formula One's most controversial years, involving Mercedes and Red Bull. They took part in one of Formula One's fiercest battles, each facing scandals and controversies we've already talked about on this channel. The story of the 5th place is an action from 2021, but its consequences only became known in 2022. And it wasn't until that year that a penalty was applied to the energy drink team. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you must know that the budget cap was introduced in the 2021 season, which is an annual spending limit imposed on all teams to equalize finances between big and small teams. In 2021, the cap was $145 million, and teams had to stay under that limit. Red Bull became involved in a scandal that gained attention due to their dominance that season, creating quite a stir. Subscribe, bell, notifications, videos. During the Singapore Grand Prix weekend, many journalists started leaking the rumor that some teams had exceeded the budget cap, and it was rumored that one of them was Red Bull Racing. After the controversial end to the 2021 season, the last thing they needed was a scandal that would once again call into question the world title won by Max Verstappen that year. For their part, Red Bull didn't make any statement about it until October 10th, when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile finally confirmed the rumors that Red Bull had exceeded the budget cap for an overspend of less than 5%, which is approximately $6 million. Other teams were also mentioned, such as Williams, which the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile pointed out for procedural errors, and Aston Martin for a procedural violation of the rules. But the only team found to have exceeded the budget cap was the Red Bull Racing team. Because of this, other teams began to pressure the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to give the energy drink team an exemplary punishment, since they argued that the extra 5% they had spent over the budget cap could give them an advantage in performance on the track, and it had been used as an investment in its development. Mercedes and Ferrari led the complaints, joined by McLaren and others, all demanding consequences for this action. The document that Red Bull submitted to the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile in March 2022 showed an expenditure of approximately £114 million. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile found mistakes in Red Bull's own exclusions that should have counted toward the budget cap, with all teams pointing to Red Bull, the 2022 World Championship leader and dominant team. They claimed they never acted in bad faith, only that it was about exclusions. They claimed that they thought these didn't fall under the budget cap, arguing that the accounting rules were too complex. The expenses that Red Bull had excluded were catering for the team staff, which amounted to an additional $1.4 million in spending. The second was sick pay for some employees, and the third was salaries and payments for workers who either changed departments or permanently left the team. Red Bull claimed the budget cap wasn't used for car development, but was just an administrative error presenting this evidence. Mercedes and Ferrari kept pressing the issue, as Wolff noted that spending $6 million could yield extra tenths in car performance. And what about Ferrari? Asking the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to clarify this situation. Red Bull accepted blame when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile found this irregularity. But since it was a new rule, there was a lot of speculation about how they were going to be sanctioned, since there was a catalogue of possible penalties that ranged from fines to a deduction of points. In the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship, there was speculation about a possible withdrawal of the title from Max Verstappen, depending on how seriously the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile considered the situation. People were still upset about the end of last year's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, but in late October, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile finally gave a verdict. Red Bull exceeded the 2021 budget cap, but the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile acknowledged their cooperation, found no bad faith, and classified it as a procedural error and minor violation under 5%. However, this did not save them from punishment, as they were fined $7 million and given a 10% reduction in aerodynamic tests in the wind tunnel and computational fluid dynamics as part of the punishment, where the rest of the teams called the sanction just another joke. In 2023, Red Bull dominated, winning 22 of 23 races. Many non-Red Bull fans felt the punishment was pointless, even though Christian Horner commented at the time that the sanction had been draconian. Given all the context, including last year's events and especially Red Bull's dominance, the situation is notable. The scandal that was generated by this violation of the budget cap takes fourth place in our ranking, particularly of Red Bull team scandals. Red Autopilot. Do you love that? Team orders are common in Formula One both now and in the past. When a team, in order to safeguard a result, explicitly asks the drivers to either give up positions or respect their current places and not get into battles. However, when a driver decides not to accept team orders, it usually leads to completely controversial situations. And what about the bronze in this ranking? It may not be the most notorious scandal, but it received significant media attention at the time. We've already discussed bigger Red Bull scandals on this channel, so this one ranks third. In 2022, Red Bull dominated Formula One with Max Verstappen winning repeatedly. That year, he won his second driver's title at the Japanese Grand Prix. His teammate, Mexican Checo Perez, pressured Charles Leclerc into a last corner mistake, securing the championship for him sooner than expected, so he didn't have to wait until the United States Grand Prix to become a two-time Formula One world champion. By now, Checo had been a loyal teammate to Max Verstappen and played a key role in his first title by holding off Lewis Hamilton in Abu Dhabi 2021. Each time Checo was told to let his teammate pass, he always complied. At the 2022 Brazilian Grand Prix, Red Bull had already won the Constructors and Drivers' Championships, and the only thing left to fight for was the runner-up spot in the World Championship, which was being contested between Leclerc and the Mexican driver. In that race, Red Bull lost its dominance and was only the third fastest car that Grand Prix weekend. It was disappointing from this team towards the end of the race. With 19 laps to go, Verstappen was in 11th place, Checo was 4th, and Leclerc was 7th. And if they finished in those positions, it would be extremely valuable points for the Mexican in the fight for the runner-up spot in the World Championship. With 19 laps left, Lando Norris's car had a mechanical failure, leaving him stranded. This triggered a safety car to remove him, and several drivers used the chance to switch to soft tires for the race finish. Since at that particular moment, they were working much better than the other tires, and the hard tires were practically useless. Checo had pitted a few laps before the safety car and didn't have any new soft tires left. So he had no choice but to hold off his rivals, who would have better tires than him at the end of this race, in a completely disadvantageous situation where everyone in the top 10 except him had soft tires. When the Grand Prix resumed, he defended for a few laps. After drag reduction system was activated, he couldn't defend against his rivals and was overtaken one by one. First Sainz, then Leclerc, then Alonso, where Checo couldn't defend with his medium tires against rivals on soft tires. Verstappen moved behind the Mexican, and Checo was told to let Max pass so he could challenge Leclerc and Alonso, since Checo couldn't attack them. With 4 laps left, it was impossible for Max to catch them. On the final lap, they gave Max Verstappen a clear message over the radio. Let Checo pass to return the position at the end of turn 12. They told Checo the same on the final lap. If Max misses them, he'll return the position to you. Max just chose not to follow the team order. Max never slowed down, ignoring his engineer's repeated requests to let him pass. When Max crossed the finish line, he simply said he'd made it clear they shouldn't ask him for these things, he had his reasons for not doing it, and he would stick to them. Meanwhile, on Checo Perez's side, his engineer apologized to him and Checo simply said, "Now we know who he really is." During their interviews, Checo was clearly upset, saying he didn't understand Max's attitude after all he had done for him. Up to that point, he clearly said that if he had 2 world titles, it was thanks to him. And when they asked Max, he only said that he did it because of things that happened in the past. The press quickly speculated that Max Verstappen's attitude stemmed from the 2022 Monaco Grand Prix, where Max reportedly blamed Checo for crashing in qualifying. Securing a better starting grid spot than him was ultimately key to the Mexican's victory on the streets of the Principality. Max was clearly referring to a past misunderstanding between these two during earlier races. However, for their part, Red Bull decided to take all the blame, and Christian Horner, the team principal of this team, came out to tell the press that it was his fault. They didn't anticipate Max and Checo being 6th and 7th, nor let the team plan for it, essentially taking all the blame and absolving Max Verstappen of responsibility. But Max's statements clearly indicated that he had done it on purpose. Ultimately, this situation didn't affect the battle for second place, as Checo's potential points were irrelevant. If Max had given him the position, would it have changed the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix result for the drivers? But this situation turned into a very tense moment, where Max's disobedience created a very intense situation with a lot of speculation involved. Due to the significant media attention it received, it ultimately takes 3rd place in our top moments. One of the most scandalous times for Red Bull was when Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel were teammates. Events like the Turkey crash or not bad for a second driver are among the most memorable parts of the rivalry. In the garage of the energy drinks team, during that particular time, these moments clearly deserve a spot in this top list. But, as we've already explained in detail and in a better way than we could do in this video, that's why we haven't touched on that topic. But without a doubt, it's a story we've talked about very little. One of the most controversial situations they faced completely disrupted Red Bull's internal dynamics. It earned 2nd place on this list due to the events at the Sepang International Circuit in 2013. Because yes, ladies and gentlemen, the silver spot on this list is the now famous Multi-21 scandal. Red Bull was in its first Formula 1 golden era. Sebastian Vettel, already a 3-time world champion, was on track for his 4th drivers and constructors title. Red Sepang. In the season's 2nd race, Red Bull led 1-2 near the end, with Mark Webber ahead of Sebastian Vettel. However, the tire degradation at the Malaysian circuit was extremely high and the teams were managing a lot the tires so they wouldn't have to make another pit stop in that race. Mercedes faced this too, telling Nico Rosberg not to pass Lewis Hamilton to protect their tires. The Red Bull duo led the Mercedes drivers by nearly 10 seconds, but Sebastian Vettel was aggressively trying to overtake Mark regardless. Experiencing the situation, and as Red Bull didn't want to compromise the result they were having, a very clear instruction was heard over the radio for their 2 drivers. Multimap 21. Without context, it could mean anything, but it meant drivers had to hold positions with car number 2's driver leading and car number 1's driver behind. With 13 laps left, the situation was clear. Webber needed to win the Grand Prix and avoid being overtaken by his teammate. But Seb didn't agree at all and decided unilaterally to stir up controversy again in the Red Garage. Vettel disobeyed the team order from his teammate and went for the overtake, passing him in turn number 1 and taking not only the lead but also the victory of the Malaysian Grand Prix from his teammate. Webber strongly criticized his teammate's behavior on the winner's podium. That podium is one of the most uncomfortable in recent Formula 1 history, with Seb and Webber showing no celebration at all, completely uncomfortable and under the gaze of millions of viewers who saw how. Sebastian Vettel had disobeyed his team and snatched victory from his teammate in a situation that many considered unfair. At the press conference, Sebastian admitted he wasn't proud of his actions and said his teammate deserved to win. But then he justified himself by saying that he wasn't going to apologize for winning the race, but rather for putting his own interests above those of the team. When asked, Christian Horner called Vettel's actions completely stupid, saying he did it as revenge for times Webber squeezed him while fighting for the title in Brazil in 2012. Horner says Sebastian admitted this to Webber a week later, and Webber did the same years after. He admitted that after the incident, Vettel told him he respected him as a driver, but not as a person. Obviously, the press was going to keep asking about this situation, seeing that things inside the team were pretty heated. Vettel repeatedly told the press he wouldn't apologize for winning the race and said the situation had already been addressed internally. Webber himself later said the apologies were completely hypocritical. He notes that even Vettel considered suing the team after the media scandal caused by those controversial orders. But what became clear is that the relationship between the two had been completely broken for a long time, and that action simply finished destroying it. Although nothing changed for Vettel and he faced no consequences, he never repaid Webber. Ultimately, the Australian retired from Formula One at the end of that season. In fact, to make way for another young Australian prospect at that time. But that particular moment is remembered as one of the biggest scandals in the history of this team. And of course, the second spot on our list, which is the Multi-21. The number one spot on this list is, by far and without a doubt, the biggest and most publicized scandal that Red Bull has ever been involved in throughout its history as a Formula One team. Because not only was it the trigger for an internal war that slowly dismantled Red Bull, but also their chief executive officer and team principal were accused of behavior involving a harassment scandal. Ladies and gentlemen, the story of our gold begins on February 5th, 2024. A Red Bull Racing employee accused Christian Horner of inappropriate behavior, including sending explicit photos and messages and being controlling. Horner denied the allegations but did not look good in the scandal. Because of the seriousness, Red Bull had to launch an internal investigation to see if their chief executive officer and team principal engaged in inappropriate conduct. The internal investigation lasted about 4 weeks as they searched for evidence of Horner's alleged harassment of the employee. And during that time, Horner didn't make any statements, except to deny that he had been involved in what he was allegedly accused of. However, weeks after this accusation, Red Bull's internal investigation ended up clearing Horner, since there was supposedly no evidence to support the employee's accusations. So there were no consequences at that time for Christian Horner, and the employee in question ended up being suspended. Instead of resolving the conflict, tensions escalated on February 29, just a day after Horner was cleared by the internal investigation. And right at the start of the Formula One World Championship, people in the paddock started receiving WhatsApp messages. A direct link to a cloud file containing alleged conversations between Horner and the employee detailing his inappropriate behavior and harassment was leaked to journalists, staff from other teams, all 9 team principals, Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile staff, and Formula One staff. It was never confirmed if the drive's contents were real. But immediately after this happened, the internal situation within the team became even more heated, as some media outlets quickly began to speculate that this move had been caused by Helmut Marko. Jos Verstappen to get Christian Horner fired, and it didn't help at all that Jos publicly stated that Horner was destabilizing the team and that he definitely had to go. Or was Red Bull Racing in danger of collapsing? A situation that seemed like just empty words from Jos Verstappen, but as if it were a prediction. Soon after, Red Bull began to lose valuable personnel, like Jonathan Wheatley and Adrian Newey, who decided to leave the team. In addition, at one point Helmut's position was also threatened. Marko and Max had to come out and defend him, saying that if Helmut left the team, they would have a direct problem with him. In addition, there were other situations where Horner and Jos ended up having some conflicts. For example, he stopped Max Verstappen's father from driving the Red Bull 18 at the Red Bull Ring Legends Parade. This caused the team to rapidly decline, lose key staff, their dominance, and the Constructors' Championship. And in 2025, they generally aren't competing for any championship. In addition, internally, Horner's management kept making decisions that made no sense at all. For example, with Checo Perez, whose contract was renewed for 2 more seasons in 2024. At the end of the season, they terminated his contract and compensated him, despite him not completing even 1 season of the new contract they signed just months earlier. They promoted Liam Lawson to Red Bull, a young driver with limited racing experience and only 2 races with the main team. The results were disastrous. They demoted him to promote Yuki Tsunoda, who's facing the same situation. Due to Checo Perez's situation at the end of 2024 and Liam Lawson's experience in the first 2 races of 2025. So once again, Christian Horner's decisions were heavily questioned throughout the beginning of this year. The internal conflict persisted, though less intensely. By mid-season, this led to Christian Horner being dismissed from the team. After 20 years leading this organization and after winning 6 constructors' titles and 8 drivers' titles, this marked a change of direction with the arrival of Lauren Mekies. But the team faces a tough road to quickly restructure and become competitive again. As I told you, Horner ended up being fired, and even the scandal of the alleged harassment is not over since the same employee filed an appeal with the British court, which will have to be resolved in the coming months, where the accuser is requesting a new review of the case. So this situation, even with Horner out of the team, is not over yet. But ladies and gentlemen, with all the resulting media scandal, this situation caused the leading ground effect team to fall sharply and sparked an internal war. The harassment scandal with Christian Horner and his management during the 2024 and 2025 seasons tops our list of Red Bull racing scandals in Formula One history. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our top 5 mini-series on Formula One team scandals. Do you agree with our list? Would you change the positions of any of them, the scandals in this top, or would you add another one that we haven't mentioned? Let me know all your opinions in the comments section. That's all from me. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe, turn on notifications for uploads, and share with friends. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter using the links in this video's description. Stay tuned for more content on your Skyline Racing channel. Thanks for watching. See you later.